I suppose that everybody in this congregation this morning would like to be successful. You'd like to be prosperous and happy. Well, the way you spell success is not the usual, nor prosperity, nor happy. You spell success with 4 letters. G-I-V-E. Now, some people think you spell it G-E-T, but that is erroneous. If you spell it G-I-V-E, then life will flow to you, and you will G-E-T. Now that is all there is to it in a nutshell. But only the perceptive, the sensitive, the wise really get with this basic, fundamental, philosophical, spiritual, economic truth. Now, a friend of mine died 2 days ago. He was a dear friend over many years. His name was Joyce C. Hall. And he was the founder of Hallmark cards. He came from a little one-horse crossroads town named David City, Nebraska. He went only to 3 grades of the country school. He was of a poverty-stricken family, but they were religious people. In fact, Joyce was named for a Methodist bishop named Bishop Joyce, and it always gave him a bad time because people would write him Miss Joyce Hall. This man became an intimate friend of Harry Truman, President of the United States. First name basis, Joyce and Harry. He became an intimate friend of Dwight Eisenhower, President of the United States, Joyce and Ike. He became an intimate friend of Sir Winston Churchill, intimate first name basis, Joyce and Winston. A boy who never went beyond 3 years of school, from a little spot on the map out of a poverty-stricken family. He built up a business of $1 billion a year based on 10 million greeting cards every day. Before he came along, there was no such thing as a greeting card. He started the whole industry. Of course, one reason for the success of his business was that I used to write cards for him myself. Get well cards, graduation cards, wedding cards, sympathy cards. He never publicly admitted this, however. I used to stay in these private apartments in the Hallmark building in Kansas City when I would go there to make a speech. And one night I had gone to bed. He was in the next bedroom. there came a rap at my door, and he said, "Norman, have you gone to sleep yet?" Well, I said, if I had, I'm not asleep now, that's for sure. He said, "Get up, I want to take a walk." I said, "I'm in bed." He said, "Throw on a robe and come on out here." And he walked in. He had a robe on. We went out and walked around the terrace for nigh on to an hour, with the moon shining down, balmy breezes blowing, middle of the night. And the reason he did this was he had an idea. He said, "I was at a meeting recently where the whole emphasis on success and prosperity and happiness is to make a lot of money." And he said, "I've got to do something to counteract that, because that is all wrong." I said, if you will produce a product or a service that is good, that is valuable, that has quality in it, and if you will do it out of love in your heart for people, you'll sell it, and the money will take care of itself. And he said, what I want you to do is tomorrow morning to start writing a booklet on just how you do that. And we'll market it through all the Hallmark outlets all over everywhere. I said, what would the title be? He paused for a moment, and he said, The Amazing Prosperity Plan. Give yourself, your mind, your love, your interest, your affection, give to people and to God, and you'll have success, prosperity, and happiness. Well, I never yet wrote the pamphlet. But when I saw in the paper yesterday that Joyce was dead, it made me, a few days ago that I saw he was dead, it made me feel that maybe I could compensate a little bit for my failure by making it in the form of a sermon. The Amazing Prosperity Plan. Give. If you are not as successful as you want to be, ask yourself, am I giving enough of my money, my mind, my heart, my prayers, myself? If you're not as prosperous as you ought to be, ask yourself the same question. If you're not as happy as you ought to be, as you want to be, are you giving enough? Now, the Bible's full of this. The 6th chapter of Luke, the 38th verse says, give, and it will be given to you. Good measure, pressed down, shaken together, running over, will be put into your lap. Pressed down, shaken together, running over. I bought some ice cream in Baskin and Robbins the other night, and they didn't press it down. They didn't shake it together, and there were big holes in it. When my wife and I got it home and my wife took it out, she said, there are holes all around this thing. You see, they don't read the Bible in Baskin and Robbins. And then there's that good old verse in Malachi. Bring ye the tithes into the storehouse, and prove me now, saith the Lord of hosts, if I will not open the windows of heaven and pour you out such a blessing that you shall not be able to contain it. Now, there's Joyce Hall says this. Says it in the New Testament. Says it in the Old Testament. You see, we're dealing with a truth here. Now, what this does is to activate the law of abundance. What is the law of abundance? Well, if you look it up in the dictionary, abundance means to rise up in waves. That's the meaning of the word. Everything will just rise up in waves for you. I have come that you might have life and have it more rise up in wave style. That's what the Bible says. Give. That's it. Now, we used to have a friend. He used to come up here to New York from Atlanta many Sundays out of the year. He was a banker. I think it was the First National Bank of Atlanta, but I couldn't be held to that. Been a long while ago now. But once when I went to Atlanta, he asked me to come around and have lunch with him. He says, come to the bank. I walked in this huge bank, one of the old style banks. Marble pillars, enormous bronze gates. Bank of the old school, now they have very unimpressive banks. But that was one of the old banks. I went back in the office. There he sat behind a huge desk, president of the bank. And I said to him, Jim, or whatever his name was at the time, how in the world do you get to be president of a big bank like this? I said, you must know a lot about finance and about money. I said, I'm awestruck and tongue-tied every time I walk in here. He said, you ought to walk in here more often then. He said, I never knew you to be tongue-tied. He said, you want to know how to be president of a bank like this? I said, yeah. Well, he said, I'll tell you how I got to be president. I was born into a Baptist family down here in Georgia, and my father hardly had 2 nickels to rub together. But my father got converted, and he joined the Baptist church, and he became a Christian, and the pastor told him to become a tither, that was part of being a Christian, and my father became a well-to-do leading man in the agricultural life of the state of Georgia. And then he told me when I was very young, I had to get a job and make some money. And I got a job in a feed store. And my salary was $3 a week. And came Sunday, they paid me off on Saturday. Came Sunday, and my father says, put your $3 out here on the table, son. So I laid out my $3. It was in change. And he took 30 cents out of it, and he pushed it over to the side. And he said, now tomorrow, you go down to the Sunday school, and you put that 30 cents in the collection for the Lord. And when your salary gets up to be $10 a week, you give $1 to the Lord. So he said, that's the way I advanced in the world. Only now, he said, under government regulations, income tax and all that, I've got my tithe up to about 20%. Now, he was a smart man. He was a banker of one of the biggest banks in the United States. You see, if you give, it'll be pressed down, shaken together, running over. There's a thing called the law of supply. All of this is according to law. All Christianity is according to law. This is not hit or miss. It's not vague. It's not poetic. It is law. Like the law of electricity, like any kind of law. This is a formula by which results are obtained. Now, my son went to a school up in New England called Deerfield Academy. And the headmaster of that school at that time was a man named Frank Boyden, the greatest expert on that human animal known as the American boy that I've ever known in my life. And he built up a magnificent school that covers many acres with modern buildings, athletic fields, and everything. And I said to him one day, Frank, did you have anything like this when you started here? He said, I had one little building with a handful of boys, and it was in debt, and the bank was about to close us out. I said, what did you do? He said, I told the Lord that what I wanted to do here was to make good men out of boys. And I said, Lord, that is what I think you want me to do. So if you want me to do it, you've got to help me. And so he said, I went down to the church on Sunday, and I gave 10% of my little income. And I activated the law of supply. How many times the bank over in Greenfield, he said, was about to write us off, but they never did, because always if you observe this law, the abundance will flow through to help you. So if you're having a tough time with your bills, keep that in mind. Now I got a letter here, as you might call it, a testimonial. This is from someplace in California. Dear Dr. Peale, after 30 years of service, I was terminated by my employing organization in 1975. The experience was shattering. I sought work, and the only thing I could find was in a hospital housekeeping department, working nights, scrubbing and polishing floors in the operating room. Must not have been much of a job. In the midst of this traumatic experience, I came across a little booklet that you had sent out called Thought Conditioners. Now, we've published about 40 million copies of this booklet, Thought Conditioners. All it is 40 of the greatest biblical texts and how to apply them. As I started reading through the book, I laughed as I read of a man who wanted to keep his old tattered copy rather than getting a new one. Now, 7 years later, I know how I felt. Mine is dog-eared, taped, stapled, retaped, and restapled. There are notes written in the margin. It is underlined in several colors. That little book went through the whole grieving process with me. I memorized each text and did what you suggested in the comment following each text. I wouldn't trade my worn-out copy for anything. Midsummer of that year, I decided to quit the hospital job and go back to school. I was 57 years old. It was quite a venture, but I felt it would be the only way I could hope to earn a living and make a new life. About that time, I read one of your sermons in which you told of a man who had lost his job. He asked you what there was left for him. You had suggested that he make a list of all that he had left and to give thanks for those things. I followed that suggestion. For myself, all I had really lost was a job. I still had health, my family, my friends, and best of all, I had God. Then you told that man to make out a budget for as little as he could get by on. My college course was to be completed in 1 year. And I said, this will be our lean year. And then you said to tithe. And I did. I decided to bypass my troubles and give, he's a poor writer, and give in any way I could. So he tithed and he gave, and he had a job sweeping out a hospital room, but he'd now gone back to school. All that year, everyone in our family had perfect health. Now, we'd always received a bonus at Christmas, but this Christmas I knew there would be no bonus. How wrong we were. A few nights before Christmas, a doorbell rang, and one after another of our good friends came to bring gifts, many of them money. At the end of the evening, as we counted our blessings, we realized we had received more than we had ever received in any one Christmas bonus in the 30 years preceding. At the end of the year, instead of a lean year, it was our miracle year. Not only were all of our financial needs met, but the adjustment of classes, homework, exams, new friends, long hours, and heavy assignments were all handled with an ease we'd never imagined. And we knew without a doubt that it was not our doing, it was God's. Almost reluctantly, we came to the close of that year. And even now, as we look back at it, we can honestly say it was our finest year. Then suddenly God gave me a wonderful new job. I became head of the Department of Spiritual Care in a nursing home corporation that owns a great many nursing homes owned and operated by a fine Christian family. They want more than just nursing care for their patients. I have experienced firsthand that when you have God, you have all you need, and that He is more than enough. No matter what the situation, what the circumstances, He is totally adequate, totally trustworthy. And you know how he ends his letter? Enclosed, please find my check for your work. Now that is the way to close any letter. You know, it's a fact. You know this as much as I do, or maybe more. You didn't come to church to hear anything new. You came to church to hear the old truth restated. The greatest practical truth that you can ever master and learn. That there's only one way to succeed. Only one. Only one way to have a normal prosperity. Only one way to have happiness. Only one. Which is, forget yourself. Stop trying to get. Love people. Give. 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 and it'll be given unto you, full measure, shaken down, running over. Our Heavenly Father, we haven't stated this truth very well, but it's a tremendous truth. It sells itself without any necessity of elaboration on our part, because it's so simple, so plain, so real. Help everybody here to experience the wonderful success, prosperity, and joy that comes from that 5-letter word, 4 letters, G-I-V. Amen.